So hi everyone, and thank you for joining us today for this Lunch and Learn on sales psychology. As a little reminder, the session's been recorded, but on speaker view, so please don't let that put you off engaging and asking questions, because I'll edit out any discussion for the final cut anyways. For those of you who I haven't met yet, my name is Hannah Joyce, and I'm a Learning and Development Advisor and the founder of Upskill Marketplace. I created Upskill Marketplace because I was sick and tired of spending so much time looking for training and coaching suppliers, scrolling through LinkedIn and scouring Google, and it was just taking too long. So I built the platform and interviewed and onboarded over 60 suppliers with a combined 200 listings. You can filter by skill, group size, location, price, and check out public reviews from our peers who have tried and tested these suppliers already. So no more emailing 40 times before you confirm a booking. Michelle, your facilitator for today's session, is one of the wonderful suppliers on Upskill Marketplace, and she is actually my sales coach too, so I can vouch for how talented she is. This is a more intimate group than we usually have with our Upskill Marketplace webinars, but that's done intentionally so we can keep it interactive and engaging as possible, so you get the most out of it. So with that, I will hand you over to Michelle for the session.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Hannah, and thank you for inviting me to share with you my journey of sales. And I guess my theory of sales is all to do with psychology. Now the group is smaller than we want to keep it nice and small. So what I want to do is to ask a question to the audience, because I guess the main thing with this is sales is always about communication and connection. And for me, it would be very difficult for me to spend 40 minutes lecturing you here. And what I would prefer is if we can make this an interactive session, and that you can participate by maybe asking questions, giving examples, and giving me your feedback. So I guess as a bit of an icebreaker, I'll give you a little bit of an introduction as to who I am, and maybe if one or two people from the floor could come up with some challenges maybe that they have, what they'd like to learn from this, or maybe just a little bit about who they are and what they do. That would be great, because it'll really help me to kind of, I guess, tailor the session towards you. I have like 4 slides that I'm going to cover, but my presence here is to help you. So it's come to me and ask me what you need to know, and I'll hopefully be able to share. So my background is in sales. I was a sales manager for 11 years. And in that time, I went from the, I guess, box structure, following a script, all the way through to realizing that really what needs to happen with sales is it's the transfer of energy and emotion. And really, when people buy from you, they're buying you, not the product. You could sell them anything. And it's really about that emotional transaction. And from that, I designed a program called Navigate, which helps businesses to, I guess, navigate their customer journey and figure out where that is. And as a benefit of taking part today, you're going to receive that course for free. So that's where I am. That's who I am, and that's where I'm from. Okay, we'll get started. So what I'm going to talk about here is really about the unconscious journey to getting a yes. I talked about it earlier on that with sales, it's really about understanding why we make the decisions that we're making, and why we do what we do. So when I talk about sales, I really think about that process of decision making. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with it, but there is a concept called the unconscious focuses of a buyer. So that's the first thing that we're going to cover in our session. So when we go through the unconscious focuses of a buyer, there's 4 different focuses that we look at there. And these are things that are going on in the back of our customer's mind without them even knowing, okay? It happens every day. It happens in every decision that we make. So a buyer doesn't have to be somebody who's buying a product. It could be somebody who is, I guess, judging a person in a relationship. Is this person a match for me? It could be anything to do. It doesn't have to be a purchase. It's things that are going on in the back of our mind, unconscious to us, and they're leading us to make a certain decision. But being a salesperson and being aware of these unconscious focuses, we can help the buyer make a decision to buy our product. So that's one of the first things that we're going to cover. The next thing then that we'll cover is how to ask quality questions. The big thing with sales is when you start selling first, initially, people think that the best way to sell is to talk, okay? And to just keep talking about your product. But by doing that, you're actually playing into one of the unconscious focuses of the buyer that's going to make them maybe step away from you. So asking questions is the best way to make a sale. So a person who is a good salesperson is a person who knows to ask quality questions. So we're going to talk about some quality questions. The third thing that we're going to cover is how to overcome an objection. So a lot of times in sales, when we're talking to customers, when we think about it, you're trying to convince the person to spend money, okay, or to invest in you. And a lot of the time that causes friction, or I would say friction with the customer in making a decision. It's, you know, it can be a nervous decision to make. So you often come up with objections. So I want to cover with you how an easy method that I use to overcome any objection. Okay, and then so what we'll do is we'll start with that unconscious focus of the buyer. So our unconscious focus of a buyer, the first one that we talk about is first impression. Okay, so when we look at our unconscious mind, a lot of the times when we think about walking into a shop, we first of all will look at, you know, what are the surroundings like? How do we feel in the surroundings? What's the person like that I'm interacting with? These are all things that are going on in the back of our mind before we even start a conversation. So you got to think about what is the first impression that your business or your product is giving to its customer, okay? What do you want people to say about you without even interacting with you? How do they think about your product? So that is the number one thing that you need to start with. So with our first impressions then, once we move on from first impressions, we then need to look at our offer, okay? So the offer that you're making to a customer, it needs to be a no-brainer. So what I mean by that is, when you've got a product and you want to sell it, you can't complicate the product to the sale, okay? So what you're looking to do is you need to make it nice and clear that, for example, Jennifer, you explained about games, that you're making games. So the simple thing is, I create a product which is a game for children. That's it. There's nothing else complicated about it. And when you think about that, you need to really build that into your sales model. People get wary and they don't trust you if it's not a no-brainer. So that's what I talked about earlier with talking a lot, you know, over explaining. When you over explain your product, you lose trust. So that's why the unconscious focus of the buyer of a no-brainer is so important. And even Jennifer, you talked about that you wanted to, you know, talk to investors. It's not about, you know, the children and the product going to the consumer. It's about the business. And even more when you're looking for investment, you got to keep it simple. There's an acronym called KISS, and it's keep it simple, stupid. Okay. And it really is that you got to keep it down to the bare minimum, the skeleton, and especially when you're making sales with businesses, so B2B. Okay, when it's consumer, yeah, you can talk a little bit more flowery language and get a little bit more emotional. And for some people, that's much easier to do. But when it comes to business, keep it simple. Okay, what is the product? What is the need that it's matching? Okay, the next unconscious focus of the buyer is no risk. Okay, so this kind of links back in with the no-brainer. You have to make sure that when you're explaining your product to the customer, that they feel safe. Okay, that whatever decision they're making, they're not running a risk. Okay, so when we're talking about no risk with your product, you need to look at it. So for example, I'm going to use Jennifer because I need, if anybody else wants to give me an example, I'm perfectly happy to take another business on here. But for example, with Jennifer and her no risk, what the no risk in her business would be is that she is creating a product that's designed, I'm guessing it's designed specifically for children, yes? Yeah, okay, and with that, there's going to be a lot of safety procedures and protocols in place to protect the child. That's an important point to get across to the consumer when they're making the purchase, okay? And it's something that we need to really think about when we're speaking to the customer. The important thing with the unconscious focuses of the buyer is that these are points that you need to hit with your customer without specifically saying, well, there's no risk involved here. Okay, and the reason for that is if you say there's no risk, your brain is hearing there's risk. Okay, so you have to explain to your customer why there's no risk without actually approaching it head on and saying no risk, no brainer, this is my first impression. Okay, so these are tools as a salesperson that you have in your kit, and you're able to use the tools to create the pitch, if that makes sense. The final one is something that we're, as humans, we're all I guess susceptible to. We all want to feel a part. Okay, we want to feel a part of a community. So it's really important that when you're discussing your products or your services, that you're really showing inclusivity, okay? And you're talking about the fact that you're involved in a community of people, using things like referrals, having customers talk about your products. These are all very important aspects of buying, and they're things that customers are looking out for. When you think about the likes of vacuum cleaners, for example, and you look at the likes of, I don't know, like a run-of-the-mill vacuum cleaner that you'd get in any electronic store versus a Dyson. Why do people choose Dyson over a standard vacuum cleaner? Can anybody give me an example using these unconscious focuses as to why they think people would choose Dyson over another model? A very important point, and I think a really good way of looking to Mother Nature and seeing I guess the truth in what you're saying is we were born with 2 ears and 1 mouth, so we should be doing twice as much of this as this. Yeah. So it's very important that we slow down, ask questions, and allow the customer to come to the conclusion themselves. Because when we push, as salespeople, when you push, all that happens when you push is you get resistance. So it's very important as a salesperson that you ask the questions which open up the customer. And that's where we're going next when we talk about questions. So when we talk about questions and how to ask quality questions, what we're really talking about is what versus why. So I want to ask a question here to the floor. And again, you can either comment in the chat or you can pop up on screen. I love when you chat with me because it really just gives a good flow to the session. But when you think about questions and somebody asks you a what question versus a why question, can you tell me what you think about that? What happens when somebody asks you a what versus a why? There's no wrong answer here. This is a discussion, so join in and let me know if somebody asked you, what are you doing today versus why are you doing that today? How does that make you feel? I want to talk about the emotional here, the emotional side.
The what is very technical.
What is very technical, okay.
And the why it's coming from inside.
Great, thank you, Nidia. And I see that, Suzanne, you have said a deeper level of engagement, but deeper level of engagement in when you ask what or why. That's the part that I'm asking, which do you feel deep with why? Okay, perfect. So with questions and in a sales environment, a lot of the time when you're speaking with somebody in that sales relationship, you don't necessarily know much about that person. And I think it was summed up very well there. What is very much is an open question. Okay, when you ask what, you're not implying, judging. There's no judgment around it. Okay, whereas when you ask a why, it's very like it's very zoomed in. Okay, and when you ask a why in a sales I guess interaction, sometimes that can scare the customer. And when we go back to our unconscious focuses of a buyer, it can imply risk, okay, and trust. They're questioning. It's like, whoa, why are you asking me that question? Even me saying it in that way versus what would you like from this interaction? What do you want to learn? What would you like to get from this product? Versus why do you want this product? It's about being more inclusive, asking what questions over why questions in sales enables the salesperson to learn more from the customer. And remember, we're doing more of this than this. So asking a what question is going to give a lot more answers than why. Why might just be one answer. What could be a load of different answers. So it's important to think about the questions that you're asking when you're presenting or you're pitching, okay? Or when you're trying to make the sale. The second kind of questions then that we talk about, which kind of lead back to what and why, is opened questions versus closed questions. There's a time and a place for both styles of questions in sales. Open questions are very important at the start of your pitch, okay, or at the start of your presentation, because what you're doing at that time is you're trying to establish a relationship or a connection with the person that you're talking to. And remember, sales is all emotional, okay? We make decisions based on emotions. It's never about practical, you know. There might be a practical reason why you want it, but the decision to get it is always going to be, it invokes an emotion, okay? So you want to find out, where is this person? What are they thinking at this moment? You're really just drawing in all this information. So asking open questions is very important at the start of the pitch. Then on the flip side, when you've got the relationship with your customer and you're getting to the point where you know that they want the product, then you start to have to start to help them close the deal, okay? So when you feel comfortable and you've got rapport with the customer, that's when you switch to the closed questions. And what I mean by closed questions is yes, no, okay? There's only two options available. And that's what you want to do when you're bringing the person to close. And the only way that you will feel comfortable in asking closed questions is if you've developed a rapport with the customer, you've dealt with the 4 unconscious focuses of a buyer, you feel connected, they feel listened to, so you feel comfortable to ask a closed question, which is, do you want the product? Yes. So when you think about open and closed questions, is there a way that you can think, you think right now that you're doing something that you could change? Or are you doing something that you're using at the moment that's working for you? Again, you can go in the chat or you can share in conversation. You're very quiet. Okay, I'm going to move on. So the next part then of questions is the yes, yes, yes formula. Okay, so when we talk about getting a yes in sales, the ideal way of closing a sale is to get 3 yeses in a row. Okay, because what happens is our minds, when we say, our egos get involved. Okay, so when we have when we ask our customer a question, or we're pitching, like Jennifer, you're going for an investment and you want to get them to say yes to it, you gotta line it up. Okay, and what you do is you ask a question where you know the answer is yes. Okay, and you're going to ask 2 questions that are going to lead to a definite yes. And then you'll ask your real question, which is, do you want to make the investment? Okay. And the theory behind this is, it's all in our psychology and to do with our ego, that once we've committed yes to something and we say it twice, then the 3rd time we're going to say yes again. But it's all to do with the way that we ask the questions. The questions need to be simple, they need to be easy to answer, and they need to be clear. Okay, so we want to get across to the customer that we're asking them very simple questions. So for example, if I was to use in a product that I used to sell, which was a water filter for a domestic market, if I was to ask a customer, okay, so you're spending €5 per week on bottled water. Yes. You want to have more water for less money on tap, is that right? Yes. Okay, so then this is the option that's available for you. Are you going to say yes? Yes. Okay, so it's lining it up that the customer, you're eliminating all excuses. You're using all the information that you've got from earlier on in the conversation with your open questions, your what questions, and then you're bringing it all the way down to your closed questions, which is the yes, yes, yes formula. Does that make sense? Is this ringing a bell? Is anyone familiar with this kind of style? Rosemary, yes, okay. And 1 open questions also help us. Yes, great. Carla, yes, 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 great. Brilliant. So this formula, what you need to do when you're in sales and you're thinking about that sales process, or you're selling yourself, you just need to slow down, okay? And it's about slowing down and thinking, what question can I ask now that's going to get me a yes, okay? Sometimes we panic, and we panic that we need to talk, okay? And that then if we don't talk, then we're going to lose the sale. But there is a theory in sales that says the next person who speaks buys. Okay, now what that means is if you've asked the question to a customer in the yes, yes, yes formula, and you're at the point where you're asking for the sale, and you say, okay, so am I putting you down for the product? You wait, there's silence, there's nothing. It's just a vacant gap. In the theory of sales says that the next person who speaks buys. Therefore, as the salesperson, if I am to speak next, I have bought into the idea that they are not going to buy my product. In sales, we must become comfortable with silence. Because going back to what was explained earlier on, the customer needs time to digest. They need to figure it out in their head. And when you're talking, they can't think. Okay? So take time to slow down. That's very important in sales. And be comfortable in silence. Be uncomfortable, be internally uncomfortable, externally comfortable. Okay? That's what we're looking for when you're talking about asking quality questions and getting good answers. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay. The next part then that we're going to talk about here is overcoming objections. So when we talk about objections, what we're really looking at here is when somebody comes to you and gives you a challenge, okay, to your product. So you've just spent 20 to 30 minutes talking to them about your product. You've asked open questions, lots of what, you're listening to everything that they've said. You've taken note of the reasons why they love your product, why they're looking for something like that. You have all of those reasons. You ask for the sale and you don't get it. An objection comes up and it comes out of nowhere. And you're like, oh God, I don't remember you saying this. So when it comes to overcoming objections, there is a formula that I would use in every situation. And this happens, I would use this formula not only in business, I would use this in my personal life as well. So if I'm trying to, I guess, get to an outcome and it involves other people and I feel like I'm challenged or there's an objection to it, I'll always apply this formula. And it's very simple, okay? So the first thing that you want to do when you're talking about an objection is you first of all need to clarify, okay? So this goes back to what is the objection, okay? So it's about getting from your customer the exact reason why they're not making a decision with you. So for example, I'm going to go back to with the water filter, the reason might be, well, I don't spend, I'm not at home all the time. That could be an objection. I'm not at home all the time, so how am I going to have the water? Yeah. So you want to clarify that is the objection. It needs to be crystal clear. Okay. It can't be waffle. You can't be confused because remember, you need to know exactly what it is in order for you to overcome it. So that is the first step. And you don't want to move from clarify until you know exactly what it is. And I would even use the words. So just to clarify, what you're saying is whatever. Get them to agree to it. You're getting them to sign a contract to say that this is the reason. The next thing after that is you want to isolate, okay? So you need to take that objection and isolate it out on its own. So you're taking the reason is, I'm not at home all the time. That's the reason. Then you're saying, okay, so I just want to confirm that the only reason, that these are important words, the only reason you cannot make the decision with me now is bang, whatever it is. And if you were able to see past that, you would say yes to me. Yes. Again, you're getting them to slowly sign a contract. You're talking to their ego, okay? And if you talk to the ego is very powerful. The ego, once it agrees to something, can't say no, okay? Even though it might feel completely wrong to say no, it cannot say no, okay? So when you want to isolate, it's very important that in that moment, the customer is also saying yes, an absolute yes. They may say at that point, well, no, it's also this. I don't buy water every week. Okay, so I'm just going to re-clarify again to make sure I understand. Got to go back. Okay, you never move forward on if they throw in another objection in the isolate part. You got to go back to clarify again. Okay, So you have to keep returning back to clarify and then come down to isolate. Once it's isolated in total, which is it's X, Y, and Z, okay, right. And is there any other reason why? That's a great way to finish isolation. Is there any other reason why? No. Once you have that, you're ready to move on to the last stage, okay? And the last stage is to overcome, okay? And when you overcome, what you need to be able to do is look exactly at what their objection is. Take it. So you've clarified it to the point, and you're just going to restate it in the overcome part. Okay, so the only reason that you can't make a decision with me right now is this. Our product does this, okay? And you need to be able to overcome it using the benefits of your product, okay? So, but what I would say, the main thing that I'm hearing there is you're looking at a pond, there's loads of fish in it, and you're looking for a trout, okay? And you're throwing the rod in and you're hoping to pull out a trout, and sometimes you pull out, I don't know, a sprat. And it's like, oh, that's not the right one. So it's about figuring out what bait do I need to use to catch the trout and to let the rest go away. Because what you need to be, I think when you're in a coaching, mentoring like space, what you need to do is you need to kind of identify what is the niche that I'm looking for. Where are my customers hanging out? Okay. And it's not about, you can influence the people that come to you by defining exactly what it is that you want to help them with. So it's not just a matter of them coming to you and saying, well, what do you do? I don't really understand what this is. It's about them coming to you and being that second type, I think, of customer that you talked about, which is, I know exactly what you do, and I want to work with you. And then at that stage, then that's when I would step into this kind of conversation with them and clarify, what exactly are you looking to get from our relationship? Okay, isolate it out that this is the only thing that you want to get from it, or there's potentially more. And then overcome it by saying, okay, well, I actually specialize in X, and I can definitely help you with that. And what I do is I have a 3-month contract. It's a 1 week session per week, and this is the cost. Absolutely. It's very important. Qualification in sales, qualification is so important. Just prior to this call, I had a call with Hannah, and we were talking about qualification, okay? And with salespeople need to have a pool. They need to have leads, okay? And you need to realize that in that lead pool, there are people there that don't suit your niche, that you don't want. And as a salesperson, you have to be confident in saying, some will, some won't, so what, next please. Okay, some will, some won't, so what, next please. There is enough fish in the sea for everyone. And it's about being able and confident to say, no, you're not for me. Okay, and I think when we're starting as a business, sometimes we panic about, oh God, I need a customer. I'll take anyone, you know? And it's about, see the value of the work that you can offer, and give yours. By taking on everyone, you're not seeing your own value. So create your own value by being able to say no, and say, you know, if it's not a yes, if I didn't get a yes now, then I'm closer. That's just another no I had to strike off. Okay, so think about it like that. I don't know, does that help?
Yeah, absolutely. I can pretty much relate to it. Thank you.
Great. Anyone else? Any thoughts or feelings or questions about the clarify, isolate, overcome?
There was a question from Rosemary.
Oh, sorry.
In the chat. No worries.
Rosemary, from a startup perspective, when you're selling brand new ideas, how much should you compromise in the isolate stage, for example? If they're requiring a feature that you think your product may need anyway, where do you meet them? Okay, perfect. So good question, Rosemary. And when it comes from a startup perspective, it's asking yourself, it kind of goes back to what I just talked about there. It's compromise and looking at it is, well, what is the expense of me like changing my business to match this customer? How much do I need this customer? And it's being okay with saying no. Because at times, I think when we start as a business and when we start operating, we always think, oh God, this person is talking to me. Yes, I just need them as a customer. But as we mature as a business, we realize We don't need everyone. Okay, so it's about setting yourself targets, goals that are based on monetary is one thing, but also you need to, you know, build a community. In the start, there are things that I would say you do compromise on, and you do kind of work toward the customer, because maybe you're missing something in the market. Sometimes when we're creating a product or a service, we think that we know everything about that product or service, but often we can have been in a vacuum creating that product. The world has moved on, and now they need, you know, they need something else. They need a little bit more, you know, or they need something to change. So it's about listening. You do need to listen. It's the listening thing again. It brings it right back to, again, listen to what your customers are saying to you, and see if there's a way that you can tailor your product in a way that you're just explaining it differently. You're not changing your product. You're just explaining it differently. We're not reinventing the wheel here. And I think that's really important for us to understand that, you know, while somebody might come out and say, you know, Jennifer, you're creating new games. The be all and end all of it is you're just creating a game for a child. Make it simple. Yeah. But the difference is the emotional reaction that you can cause in the child or in the buyer or in the investor. And that's what you need to think about. It's about the psychology of the sale, not about the hard product and changing like specific features of a product. I don't know, does that help, Rosemary? Brilliant. Okay. Yes, exactly. Bring it back to the value. If you believe enough in your product, okay, all that you need to do is, when my theory is, create your product, create your service, go to the market, talk to your customers. When you're with your customers, listen to the feedback. Okay, and when you listen listen to the feedback that comes through from the customer, then you need to potentially go back to the drawing room and say, okay, if I apply, you know, all of this change to my product, is my product the same or is it different? Do I feel as passionate about it or not? And it's really about asking yourself those questions. Is it worth changing everything for this one customer? No, usually not. A lot of the times, Jennifer, when it comes to asking questions, the challenge or the fear is with the person who's asking the question, because they're afraid of what the response could be. But if you never ask the question, you'll never know. And it comes back to that statement again that I was explaining. Some will, some won't. So what? Next, please. If you don't ask the question, you'll never know. And it's the people who succeed in sales are people who are not afraid of asking questions. Be curious. That is important. And I would say that that's very important for investment. When you're looking for investment, be curious.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think there's a question there from Carla, early stage question. Any psychology tips on talking to potential customers around price point, what they'd be willing to pay? Yeah, Carla, with that, I've always found that with price, being upfront is the best. So get straight to the point. You got to ask them, what are you willing to spend? Okay. And once you get that out, it's like people are afraid to ask about money, but the person who asks for the money will get it. If you never ask, you'll never get. So it's really important that when you're trying to figure out your price point, that you have an idea in your head as to what's actually, I guess, financially, you're financially able to do. You know, you don't want to go in and be like, well, would you pay €3? And you're like, God, if I don't make €10 on this, I can't win. It's go in with the expectation, build it up first about what the product is, and give it the feeling of the value. So when you talk about the value of it, up the value, even if it's €10, up the value and make it feel like it's €15, and then bring it down and say, well, it's only 10. So that's how I would kind of go around it like that. I think in Ireland it's called a farmer's discount, when you have the value of the product up higher and then you give it at a lower price. That's always something that I would think about. Another thing to do with psychology is, for some reason, our brains like nines, you know, so 9.99. That there's a feeling of that there's a psychology behind that as well. So think about that in your pricing, and that's kind of how I would approach that. But definitely go in with the idea of what you want the price to be. Talk about the value, and then at the end of the pitch, you talk about, you go to the closed, which is, so, you know, you can see the value in this. Do you think you could spend 20 euro on this? Okay, this actually only costs 15. That's kind of how I would go about that. I hope that answers your question. And then Rosemary, they'll hesitate but never say no in case someone else great says yes and they regret it. Yeah. How about, do you want to invest now or do you want to invest this round? Okay, great. Yeah, another great question as well, Rosemary, to add into that is, if you feel like when you've pitched a product to a customer and that they have agreed that this is it, this is perfect for them, it's to ask them a very difficult question, which it's to do with NLP. So NLP is neuro-linguistic programming. So it's to ask a question that confuses them, which is, when is now a good time to make a decision? So it's getting them to, they're like, what? There's no, the context of that sentence is completely out there, but it talks to the subconscious mind. And it says now is a good time to make a decision. It's like saying, don't think of a pink elephant. What's the first thing you do? You think of a pink elephant. Okay. So it's talk to the subconscious mind. Let me just go here now. There's a few questions flying in here, so I'm just gonna, okay, perfect. Any other questions or anything else? Any other I guess statements or anything? We're coming toward the end of the session now, so I just want to make sure I'm answering any questions that people have, or any statements that people want to make. Did you find it helpful? So I would say with that, you gotta ask yourself the question: am I babysitting? Am I doing more work than they are? Yes, they're paying, so they're paying you for the service of coaching, okay, or mentoring. Your job is to mentor them. Your job is not to manage their money. Your job is not to tell them when they need to pay, okay? So that all comes from the expectation that you set in the original phone call, okay, or in the original connection, which is, this is what I do, this is a service that I offer, and this is how I charge. Do you understand? Have you any questions? And you sign it at that stage, you get it at that point. It's very important that that you tie down the expectation you want from the customer in the initial interaction, okay? And more importantly is, if you feel like it's not going to close on that first initial call, that you are creating the environment and setting up, I guess is what it would be. You're setting up exactly what's going to happen on the next call, okay? So for example, in that situation, if you've got something, they say, oh, I don't have the money now, and it's okay, right, no problem at all. So let me just ask you, when am I following up with you? In a week. Okay, and in a week's time, what's going to happen? I'm going to have the money. Great. So in a week's time, when I give you a call, you're going to have 40 euro ready to go, and we're going to book in our first session. Is that right? Yes. Okay, great. So I'm going to give you a call. I'm going to pencil it in for next week. We'll give you a call, 40 euro. We'll set the session and we're all good. Yeah? Yes. Okay, great. I'll talk to you then. It's a yes, yes, yes. That's the yes, yes, yes again. Okay. And you're tying them in. Remember, it's about creating verbal contracts with your customer. And although you may see, it may feel to you, because it's not on paper, that it's not real, if it comes out of here, it's way more real than what it is on paper. Okay? And that's what's very important. It's tying down the customer to a decision.
Oh, thank you so much. This was a great session.
No problem, no problem. And if we have time, can I ask why I don't know, Carla, I've read into it before. So Carla's asking why we like 9s. It's the feeling of, I think it's to do, when I read about it before, it's something to do with the fact that we feel that we're getting better value for money. It's closer, it's as close to, I guess, a round figure. And it's like, if you feel like you're getting that bit of a discount, you just feel like you're winning. And that's always important for people, to feel like they're getting good value for money. That's an important thing. There's a really interesting case study or like theory that I read before, and it's about popcorn in America. And it was about cinema, and they had small, medium, and large popcorns. Sorry, they had a small and a large, I think. But the small popcorns would always sell, and the large ones wouldn't. And the owner of the cinema was trying to figure out why this kept happening. So what he did was he introduced a third size, so a small, medium, large, and then he looked at his pricing. So his pricing, we'll say for the small one was €2. His pricing for the middle one was €6, and his pricing for the large one was €8. When he did that, even though the price of the small and the large never changed and he introduced the medium, everyone bought large. Okay, because it was a feeling of we as humans like to gather, and we like to feel like it comes from like our hunter-gatherer days. We need to feel like we can gather stuff. Think about when we had that really bad weather, or when COVID hit first. Everyone went out buying toilet paper. Why toilet paper? Toilet paper is light and big. It gives us an illusion of having a lot. And that's the feeling that we as customers like to have. So I don't know if that kind of helps with it, but it's a really interesting story if you want to look it up. I think I found it somewhere online. If you look at the popcorn pricing theory or something like that, you'll find it. And I guess that's something that, that's the reason why I think that sales is all psychology, and why I themed the session like this. So I guess with the journey then that we just went through here, and I'd like to thank Hannah again for having me come on and chat with you, and thank you guys so much for engaging with me. Is the course that I created is called Navigate Your Customer Journey. So it's 8 steps. It's the acronym is Navigate, and I go through how to map out your customer journey. So what Hannah will do is at the end of the session, and maybe in a couple of days' time, she's going to send the recording, and she'll also send a link to the course as well. You're more than welcome to take part in it. It's there for you to use whenever you want. And of course, I'd love if you would connect with me on LinkedIn. You'll find me using my name there, Michelle Guthrie, and you'll be able to we'll be able to connect. And if there's anything in time that you ever want to talk about, or questions or anything like that, I'm delighted to have a conversation with you. So I'll hand back to Hannah now to to close out.
Amazing. Thank you, Michelle. So brilliant. Thank you so much. And thank you so much, everyone, for coming. I hope you got a lot out of the session. And yeah, as Michelle said, I will send on the recording and the course that's free for you all to access as well. And hopefully we'll see you at the next session.